My name is Emily Reeves. I was 20 years old, living alone for the first time in a small house on the edge of town, when a man who subscribed to my OnlyFans account figured out where I lived and parked outside my bedroom window at night just to watch me. I want to tell you about that. And before I get to my own story, I need to tell you about my college friend Nina, because what happened to her is the reason I want people to understand that the danger on these platforms does not always look the way you expect it to. It is not always a stranger. Sometimes it is the person already in the room. Keep listening, because Nina went outside to take a phone call and never came back. I met Nina my first week of college. We were assigned to the same dormitory floor and ended up in rooms 2 doors apart. By the second week, we were inseparable. She was the kind of person who made any room feel louder and warmer simply by being in it. Dark hair, dark eyes, the particular confidence of someone who had always known she was attractive and had learned to carry it lightly rather than heavily. Every person she met became a friend within 20 minutes. Boys followed her across campus with expressions they were not entirely aware they were making. Girls alternated between wanting to be around her and resenting how effortlessly she made everything look. I liked her because underneath the brightness, she was genuinely kind. She noticed when people were having a bad day. She remembered details about your life that you had mentioned once in passing. She was loyal in the way that only people who do not need to be loyal actually are out of choice rather than obligation. Her boyfriend Matt was a year ahead of us. He had a farmhouse outside town with enough room to host the entire social ecosystem of our program on weekends. We went there often. It was the kind of place where the evenings started with good intentions and ended with someone asleep on the porch and someone else vomiting in the garden. We were 20. That was what 20 looked like. I found out about Nina's OnlyFans on a rainy afternoon in November. She came out of the bathroom in content posting clothes, which was the phrase she used, and explained what she had been doing for the past several months to fund her shopping habit. She was matter-of-fact about it. She said she kept her face out of everything. She said it was easy money and nobody could identify her. I asked her to be careful. She told me to relax. She made me promise not to tell Matt. I promised. There was one moment that I have thought about many times since that night. About a week before Nina disappeared, we were at the campus gym. A woman came up to us, one of the librarians, a woman named Stanley, who was somewhere in her late 40s. She focused entirely on Nina. She complimented her figure. She asked about a tattoo Nina had on her side, a small mermaid in blue and green ink. Nina showed her. Mrs. Stanley smiled. Then she walked away without having said more than 3 words to me. I thought she was just fond of Nina, the way some older adults become fond of popular young people, a kind of benign attention. I thought nothing of it beyond mild irritation at being invisible beside my friend. I think about that moment in the gym all the time now. The way Mrs. Stanley's eyes went to the tattoo, the way she asked about it specifically, the particular quality of attention she paid to Nina's body. I think about what was behind that attention and what she was doing with the information she collected in that interaction. The night Nina disappeared, we were at Matt's farmhouse. Larger crowd than usual. The beginning of the pre-holiday period, people in celebratory moods, the kind of night that spirals. Nina drank more than I had seen her drink before. I tried to slow her down and she waved me off with a smile. Her phone was with me because she had left it on the table when she went to dance with Matt. I felt it ring. I brought it to her, and she stepped away from the music to take the call. I watched her walk toward the side of the house. She had the phone pressed to her ear and she was nodding. That is the last image I have of her. The back of her, walking around the corner of the house in the dark, nodding at something she was hearing. When I woke up the next morning on Matt's couch, it was to the sound of Matt's voice raised in that particular register that means something is wrong. She was not in the house. She was not at the dormitory. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I told the police about the call from the unknown number. I told them about the OnlyFans account because I had to, because it was information they needed, And keeping my promise to Nina mattered less than finding her. Rumors moved through the campus like weather. Some people said a subscriber had tracked her down. Some people said she had just left. I knew neither of those things was true. The CCTV footage from a light post near the farmhouse showed Nina on the sidewalk waiting, looking left and right, a truck coming from the right, Nina walking toward the driver's side window as it slowed. Getting in. She got in because she recognized the driver. The truck belonged to Mrs. Stanley. When the police searched her home, they found what they found. I am not going to describe in detail what was in that basement. Nina and Mrs. Stanley's husband were both there. He had been a subscriber. He had found Nina's account, found the tattoo he had seen in the photos, made the connection through Mrs. Stanley in a way that I still do not fully understand. He had been meeting Nina separately for months. Mrs. Stanley had found out. The call that brought Nina outside that night came from a number registered to a burner. Mrs. Stanley had called her and told her some version of events convincing enough to get Nina onto that sidewalk, looking left and right, waiting for a truck to arrive. I read the confession transcript later. Mrs. Stanley described seeing the mermaid tattoo in the gym and knowing immediately who Nina was from her husband's browsing history. She had been waiting from that moment. She had been planning from that moment. 3 weeks between seeing the tattoo in the gym and the truck pulling up outside the farmhouse. 3 weeks. I graduated 2 years later. I moved across the state. I work in a beauty salon now because it is familiar and because the noise and the conversation fill a space that has been quiet since November of sophomore year. I think about the gym every time I get into it. The way Mrs. Stanley asked about the tattoo with that smile on her face, the way I stood there feeling invisible, feeling left out of the attention, not understanding that being invisible in that moment was the safest thing I could have been. Nina hid her face in every photo. She thought anonymity was protection. She did not know that a single identifying detail visible in a single photo on a single afternoon could close the distance between an account and a person standing on a sidewalk waiting for a truck. She had a small mermaid on her side. That was all it took. Boris. My own story started about 18 months after I moved out of my parents' house. I was 20. My mother had died when I was 15, and my father had remarried, and the house had a specific atmosphere that made it clear I was occupying space that was being managed rather than offered. I left at 18 and got a job at a salon and rented a small one-story house on a quiet street at the edge of town. The house was right for my budget, which meant it was small and had large windows and the bedroom faced the street. I noted that when I moved in and told myself I would eventually hang better curtains. I kept meaning to do it. I never quite got around to it. A coworker named Lucy told me about OnlyFans. She described it as straightforward. Post photos, earn money, no obligation. I was 20 years old and independently supporting myself on a salon worker's salary, and the math of that was not working as well as I had hoped. I opened an account. I used my real name, which I understand now was a serious mistake, but which at the time seemed like a minor one. The privacy settings on the platform felt sufficient. I assumed the subscribers were people with no means of finding me beyond what I chose to share with them. For the first several months, nothing alarming happened. I built a subscriber base slowly. Some people sent messages that I ignored. Most were anonymous and stayed anonymous, and the money helped with the months when the salon was slow. One evening, I was in my bedroom taking photos for a new post. My window was uncovered. The street outside was quiet and dark. I was not paying particular attention to what was visible from outside. I looked up and there was a truck parked on the street directly across from my window. A man in the driver's seat, looking directly at my window. Large, still eyes. A grin. I stood in the middle of my bedroom and looked back at him, and he did not look away. He did not start the engine. He sat there with that expression on his face and watched me. And the understanding of what was happening arrived slowly and completely. He had found my address. He had driven to it. He was sitting outside my house in the dark looking at me through the window the way someone watches content they have paid for. I went to the window and closed the curtains. I turned off the light and sat on the edge of my bed in the dark, listening for the truck engine. After about 10 minutes, I heard it. He drove away. The next morning, there was a comment on one of my photos from an account with the name Boris. It said, "You don't have to hide from me. I anyway watch you here." I stared at that comment for a long time. I told myself to report it and block the account. Instead, I convinced myself it was bravado, the kind of unsettling but ultimately empty thing that people say online to feel powerful. I told myself he was probably dozens of miles away and had found my general area from context in my photos. I told myself the truck outside could have been anyone. I did not block him. He was a paying subscriber and he had not technically threatened me. I told myself I was being reasonable. I was not being reasonable. I was being afraid of the financial cost of losing paying subscribers, and I was constructing a rational-sounding framework around that fear. 3 days later, I was driving home from work. I stopped at a traffic light on the main road into my neighborhood. A truck pulled up beside me. I looked over. Boris. Close enough now that I could see his features clearly for the first time. Wide-set eyes with a particular stillness to them, the kind of stillness that is not calm, but the absence of expression where expression would normally be. He looked at me the way he had looked at me through my bedroom window. Then the light changed and I accelerated and he stayed with me. He was not trying to lose me. He wanted me to know he was there. The signal at the corner of my street went red. I stopped. He pulled alongside again. He made a sound with his mouth. The sound you make to call a dog, a sharp, wet click between the teeth. He waited for me to look. When I did, he spat on my window and drove away. I drove the last 2 blocks to my house with my hands very tight on the wheel and my breathing louder than the road noise. I parked in the driveway and sat in the car for a while before I went inside. That night, I removed my account. I deleted everything. I blocked every account I could find that I suspected was connected to him. I did not go to the police. I know what that sounds like from the outside, but I was 20 and my father was in another city and I was afraid he would find out about the account, and I was afraid of the specific look on his face when he found out. I was more afraid of that look than I was of Boris. That is the honest truth, and I am not proud of it, but it is what was true at the time. I did not go to work for 3 days. Lucy came to the house to check on me. I told her what had been happening. She sat on my couch for 2 hours and listened, and then told me I needed my father here, and I needed to go to the police in the morning. I called my father that evening. He drove up the next morning and arrived in the afternoon. I sat down with him and told him everything. The account, the photos, Boris, the truck, the comment, the traffic light, the sound he made with his mouth. I told him all of it. My father was quiet through most of it. His expression went through several phases. Anger that I had put myself in that situation. Relief that I was safe. Then a kind of focus that I recognized as him deciding what needed to be done next. We agreed to go to the police first thing in the morning. That night I went to bed at 11. My father stayed up in the living room watching a football game at low volume. The house was quiet in a comfortable way, the way it feels when someone else is there. I was almost asleep when I heard the sound against my window glass. A clicking, light, deliberate, the kind of sound a fingernail makes when drawn slowly across a pane. I sat up in the dark. The clicking again, same pace, same deliberateness. He had come back. I wanted to call for my father. I was afraid that calling out would tell Boris that I had heard him, that he would run, that we would lose the chance to trap him. I decided I would go to the window myself and see him clearly enough to describe him to the police, enough for a positive identification. I got off the bed without making a sound. I moved to the window in the dark, keeping my feet careful on the floor. I reached the wall beside the window and crouched down. I moved the curtain edge with 2 fingers, just enough to see through. His face was already there, at the same level as mine. He had crouched at the window at exactly the same time I had, as if he had anticipated the move. His eyes were directly in front of mine through the glass. I froze. He did not blink. His eyes were inches from the pane, and they were not moving, and they were looking straight at me, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then he smiled. I screamed. I fell backward onto the floor, and I heard my father in the hallway, and his bedroom door open, and his footsteps running, and then his voice through the window, shouting at the man outside. My father grabbed the baseball bat from under my bed, the one he had insisted on leaving there after I told him what had been happening, and he went outside. I ran after him. Boris was at his truck when my father reached him. My father hit him across the back of the head with the bat. Boris went down screaming. He was on the ground calling me names, screaming them, at my father, telling my father what he thought of me, the specific, ugly language of a man who believed his attention had given him ownership and was furious at the withdrawal of that ownership. My father raised the bat again. Boris reached into his jacket and took out a gun. He shot my father in the shoulder. I do not have clean words for the next few minutes. I ran to my father on the ground. My neighbors were coming out of their houses from the sound. Somebody called 911. Boris got in his truck and drove. My father was taken to the hospital. The bullet had gone through the shoulder without hitting anything critical. He was in surgery for 2 hours and recovery for 3 weeks. The police arrested Boris within 48 hours. He had a prior record that included harassment charges from a previous address. They found items in his truck consistent with extended surveillance. He had been tracking my movements for longer than I had known he existed. He was charged with aggravated assault, stalking, and criminal threatening. The things my stepmother said after my father came home, I am not going to repeat here. She was very clear about where she placed the responsibility for what had happened. She took my father back to California, and I have not spoken to him since the day he left the hospital. I stayed in that house for another 3 months because I could not afford to move immediately. I replaced the curtains with blackout fabric the day after my father went home. I checked the locks on every window every night before I went to bed. I moved eventually. New city, new salon job, new address that I have not shared publicly in any form. I think about the comment Boris left that morning. You do not have to hide from me. I anyway watch you here. I read that message and told myself it was bravado and did not act on it. The distance between reading that message and the night his face was at my window was about 2 weeks. 2 weeks in a decision I made not to act on something that my body already understood was a threat. I am not going to tell people they are wrong to use platforms like OnlyFans. I am not going to stand on a position of judgment about how other people earn money or what choices they make about their bodies. That is not what this story is about. What this story is about is the specific thing that those platforms can enable when someone subscribes with information gathering as the objective. The photos I posted gave Boris a detailed understanding of my home interior, the layout of my bedroom, the position of the window, the direction it faced. He used that understanding to position himself correctly. He was already oriented toward the right window on the right side of the house before I ever knew he had my address. I do not know how he found my address. I used my real name. That was enough. A real name in a general area and a motivated person with time on their hands is enough. I also think about Nina every time I tell my own story. The way her situation and mine rhyme in certain ways. A subscriber who found an identifying detail. A person who used that detail to close the distance between an account and a front door. The difference between our outcomes is my father being in the living room that night. That is it. That is the entire difference. He was in the living room because Lucy convinced me to call him. Lucy came to the house because I had not been to work in 3 days. I had not been to work because after the traffic light incident, I was finally afraid enough to stay home. 3 weeks between the first truck outside my window and the night Boris shot my father. 3 weeks. I think about Nina walking around the corner of the farmhouse to take a phone call, nodding at whatever she was hearing disappearing from my line of sight. I think about the mermaid tattoo. I think about the comment I should have screenshotted and taken to the police and did not. I think about my father's face when he came through my door the afternoon he drove up from California. The particular expression of a parent arriving for something they wish they did not have to arrive for, but who arrived anyway without hesitation. I think about the baseball bat under my bed. I think about the 2 weeks I wasted talking myself out of what I already knew. If someone makes a comment that tells you they know where you are, take it to the police that day. Not when you feel ready, not after you have gathered more evidence. That day, what you have is enough to start a record. Starting a record is the most important thing, because the time between I watch you here and his face at your window is shorter than you think.